Okay, good morning. So we're starting Shin Mem Ches. It's a short sif. Let's go. Haya oimed b'shus hayochid. Says the Mechaber. A person is standing in a rishus hayochid. V'hitzi yodai melea peiris l'shus rabim, and he puts out his hand, which is full of fruit, into the rishus rabim. B'tei chasara, within 10 tfachim. B'shoigeg, if he did this b'shoigeg mutar lachzira, he's able to bring his hands back. Chazal allow him to bring his hands back in la'isa Hotza'ah, to that Hotza'ah where he's standing. V'also la'ishita la'Hotza'ah acheres, but he can't move it into a different Hotza'ah. V'im b'mezid, if however he initially did that b'mezid, also afilu la'achzeh la'isa Hotza'ah, Chazal made a knas that they don't allow him to bring it back even to that Hotza'ah. So let's just do the Mishnah Berurah till there. Aleph, Pasei Chasara. Now, he puts his hands b'toich hasara, below 10 tefachim. Why? Because the lamala me'asara b'shus rabim hu makom p'tur. Because we've said before that more than 10 tefachim, higher than 10 tefachim in rishus rabim, has the status of a makom p'tur. Uchadlel b'simin shimem hey, see if you'd base. V'afilim hoisi b'mezid mutzah lachzir. And therefore, even if his moshit, he puts his hands out on purpose, we allow him to bring it back. So if he does it b'shoigeg, then we allow him to bring his hands back in with the fruit, laden with fruit. After Ovid Surah, even though he has done an Issa, she'asa akira b'shus hayochid, he did an akira into a rishus from a rishus hayochid, k'dei lahaitzi l'rishus rabim, in order to take the fruit into rishus rabim. Afilu hachi loy konsuhu rabbanon given the b'shoigeg also. Chazal didn't make a knas against him, because ultimately he did this b'shoigeg, and therefore they allow him to retract his hands. However, that is only la'isa Hotza'ah. Why? It says the Mishmur kadesh le'iskay machshavtei shechoshav lefnoisa misham, because he didn't really fulfill his machshava, because his planning was to take it beyond there. But l'Hotza'ah acheres, but to take it to a different Hotza'ah, that we don't allow. Afilu niskavim etchila le'tzir rishus rabim, even though he intended to take it to rishus rabim, gam kein also la'ashita l'Hotza'ah acheres, we still don't allow him to take it to a different Hotza'ah. Ta'al kol ponim niskay machshavta shechoshev v'leisim mechatzera, because he fulfilled some degree of his intention, i.e., to move it out of his rishus into another Hotza'ah. And the concern is that maybe on another occasion, he'll put the items down into a rishus rabim, and therefore he'll do a proper issa deraisa. The dafka also. Some say that it's dafka when his kavana was initially lefanois loisa chotze, that's when it's also the niskai machshav to the gamri, because ultimately he's done what he set out to do. But if he intended to take it out to rishus rabim, then mutar lefanos lechotze, we allow him to not fulfill that and to just take it into a chotze. Now, when do we say all of this? When that chotze is not b'dyuta achas. What does that mean? B'shura achas, on one stretch, on one line. They're opposite each other. But if they're on one stretch, like you see in the bottom picture on the picture 12, they're on the same side of the street, then varshus harabim nimsheches gamkein b'chatzeres, and the rishus harabim is also is stretched along between the two chatzeres. Haliyesh b'ze'isa deraisa. Then, if you're going to stretch over from one chatzah to another over the rishus harabim, you've got a problem of an issa deraisa. Afilu him l'mal me'asor, even if it's more than 10 tefachim, u'k'moshe kosav le'el b'soif siman shin mem zayin. Okay, so all of that is b'shoigeg. That's when we allow him to retract his hands. But if he did it initially b'mezid, Chazal did a knas also lachzir la'isa Hotza'ah. Says the Mishnah Berurah b'mezid also. Why? To konsuhu rabbanon mishum da'ovad surah, because the Chachomim gave a knas that he did an issa. Ele yochaz b'yodeh ad shechashecha. He's got to hold on to it until Motzei Shabbos. Okay. So this is from the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Gimel. If you started Gemara Shabbos, you probably would have done this brisa. That's what we're talking about. So if he takes his hands, he's holding fruit, and he's standing in Rosh Hashanah, and he stretches out to take them into Rosh Hashanah, and then he gets to a Hotza'ah. If he did it b'shoigeg, Chazal say, okay, you only done this at Rabbanon, and therefore you're allowed to take it back in. But if you did it b'mezid, then not. Okay, now carrying on the Mechaber. V'yesh oimrim, dahani mili kasher tzir miboydiom. Some say that this only applied if you initially you stretched out your hands before Shabbos began. But if you actually did this initial act on Shabbos, mutalach zira, Chazal allow you to take your hand back. Why? Because you might throw it down, and then you've got a problem because there's going to be an Issa D'Oraisa, because you've done Nakira and you've done the transfer over to Rosh Hashanah, and you'll throw it down by placing it down. You've done a Hanocha. So to avoid that scenario, we want to just make sure you bring it back, and they allow you to be machzi your hands. It says, let's just do the Mishnah on that. Oz konsur rabbanon al shehisha es yodeh b'mezid ba'avir Rosh Hashanah ad shetechshach. There, what would be the knas? The knas, according to the Yeshurun, would be that you put out your hands before Shabbos and you left them there, and the Shabbos now began, and therefore the Chazal imposed on you a knas. But if you did it on Shabbos, they were wary of you doing a more serious issa. So it says mutalach zira, says Rashi, it says Mishabura, Sifkat and Zayin, Rotzalema, La'isa Chotzer. They allow you to bring it back to that Chotzer, to avoid you doing a Chiyav Chatzah. Says Mishabura, Hailish Nalav Dafka, to have a Mezin Mairi. And therefore it's not going to be a Chiyav Chatzah. Chatzah is only B'Shegeg. El Rotzalema, Shema Yishkach, maybe you'll forget. V'yashlich miyoda, you'll then discard the items that you're holding. V'yovel idei melacha sheyesh bo chiyav chatzos, and you'll come to do a melacha which has got a chiyav chatzos la'isa b'shkogov for someone who does it b'shegig. That's how you got it sort of touch the words of the mechaber. Masha enkein kasher tziyah miboyjom, as opposed to if you did it miboyjom. Afilim yashlich lebesoif, even if you discard the items, but you initially stretched out your hands before Shabbos, then lo yerak isur ba'alma. That's only an issa. That's only a drabonon. You'll never get to do the deraisa if you stretched out your hands initially from before Shabbos. Why? To holas also akira b'Shabbos, because you didn't do the first element of the crime, i.e. the akira, on Shabbos. You did it before Shabbos. And the Eli Rabbi says that many Rishonim say that we can be makel like the Yeshomrim, i.e. that if you the whole knas was only if you stretched out your hands before Shabbos, but if you did it on Shabbos, even if you did it b'mezid, Chazal will allow you to retract your hands to avoid a bigger issa. Okay, right. Let's just finish off this sif. When is all of the above true? When you stretched your hands out into Rosh Hashanah. But if you only stretched it out into an area which is a karmelis, which is an issa drabonon to carry into there, everyone agrees that you're allowed to retract your hands. Says the Mishnah Berurah, because at the end of the day it's a drabonon. Even if you did discard it and did put it down, you've only violated the drabonon. To make a knas in that situation is like a gezer l'gzera, and Chazal don't do that. Whether you put out your hand b'mezid, b'shegeg, doesn't make a difference. And you can only return it back to that chotzer, but not to a different chotzer. The Vilna Gaon in his commentary, masik le'isur b'karmelis kamoi b'shus rabim. He actually treats the issa karmelis like a rishus rabim, and therefore it will have the same gravity as the first part of the mechaber. Okay, new case, and now the Mishnah Berurah just makes 2 points over here. Point number one, we're in the second line on the next page. Hamafane chafetzim mizovis lezovis. If a person moves items from one corner of the room to another, and then he changes his mind and says, I'm not going to take it from the corner A to corner B of this room, but actually I'm going to take it outside into the Rosh Hashanah. He has not done an Issa D'Oraisa. Because when I initially did the Akira, my lifting it up, was with the intention to take it to the corner of the room, which is of course mutter. And therefore my only crime, as it were, is the hanocha, is placing it down. Orach is surah ba'alman, that is only a drabonon if I've only done one element of the crime, be'issa. Next halacha, next sort of point. If a person was holding a large beam, and he raises one side of the beam, V'kotzah hasheni munach ba'aretz, and the second side of the beam is on the ground still. V'chozah v'higbia hakotzah hasheni, and then I lift up the second side. Afilu kol hayom kula, even if I'm spending the whole of Shabbos doing this. In other words, I'm not lifting the whole thing up in one go. I'm lifting one side up, and then I'm lifting the other side up. Potter, there I will never get to an Issa D'Oraisa. It's only going to be Potter, i.e., it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, but it's Potter from a D'Oraisa, because I haven't lifted up the whole beam from the ground. If I drag it, then I would be chayiv, because someone who rolls something on Shabbos, that is also considered carrying, and therefore that could violate the Issa.